The main event in pro wrestling feels important again these days. This is good. While it's not the same as it was, you always want your last match to deliver big. Look at boxing and MMA, they still have this approach for a reason. WWE has been around so long sometimes they do go crazy though, so I am Simon Miller, thank you for joining me. And let's take a walk down memory lane. Number 10, Lawrence Taylor versus Bam Bam Bigalow at WrestleMania 11. Well, what a world we live in. WWE has always been keen on outside athletes and celebrities competing, and at WrestleMania they went all the way with that. NFL player Lawrence Taylor was happy to come in, and with the promise of fame and wealth down the line, Bam Bam Bigalow was happy to be the opponent. Even then, I don't think anybody thought they would main event the show, especially as Diesel versus Shawn Michaels for the WWF title was on the card. Those guys must have been livid. It was also the first time since Mania 1 where we use an outside body in such a role, and look, this is way better than it should have been, even though it wasn't great. Fair play to that Bigalow though. That dude held it together. The strangest part is Taylor won, and then was never seen again. And of course, Bam Bam never got his promised push afterwards. So we've all learnt a lesson there. Don't trust people in wrestling. Number 9, Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Kevin Owens at WrestleMania 38. So this was one of the best days of my life. And I mean that. I had always wanted to be in the crowd for a Steve Austin pop, and I got this during night 1 of WrestleMania 38 when the Rattlesnake took on Kevin Owens. It was wonderful. For starters, I also love KO, so this was a treat, and Austin wound back the clock. If he was going to work a match, he was going to go 100%. Health and age be damned. You could just tell they were having the best time too, but let's be honest. Even after WrestleMania 37, if I had told you this was going to happen 12 months later, you would have laughed in my face. Rightfully so. I still go back and watch it today because it feels like such a fever dream, and really it's all I want from pro wrestling. But if you are going to talk about crazy main events, one of the most successful wrestlers of all time coming back from nowhere, well, it ranks right up there. Number 8, Randy Orton versus Bray Wyatt at No Mercy 2016. Now, there is nothing wrong with this at first glance. Randy Orton was a star, Bray Wyatt was the best. Let them fight. There was a story here too, as Wyatt had tried to corrupt Orton only for Randy to betray Bray, which also led to Luke Harper returning. Great. Works for me. The reason people were confused is due to the other matches on the card. Dean Ambrose versus John Cena versus AJ Styles was happening for the WWE title, but we put that on first. Even the IC Championship match between Dolph Ziggler and The Miz felt big. I mean, Dolphy Boy had put his career on the line. It just meant when Randy and Bray were out here, people didn't really know why. Nobody explained it. It's not a massive problem because, again, they were also stars. But really, when you broke it right down, it didn't make too much sense. Number 7, DX versus the Spirit Squad at Vengeance 2006. Which is the same for this one too, although you can kind of figure it out. Given who was involved, they decided the D-Generation X versus McMahon's feud was more important than anything else in the company, so boom. We ignored the rest and just stuck the Triple H and Shawn Michaels match in the main event at Vengeance. The real issue was, this would have been better somewhere else on the card. I actually thought this was fun enough, although a little bit immature, but hey, that's okay. Just use it as some levity on the pay-per-view that did feature some of the biggest stars. Fans rejected it because of how it was set up, and the Spirit Squad at the same time just weren't ready. I quite liked the gimmick, but even then, you gotta pick and choose wisely. It was also a 5-on-2 handicap match, and DX still whooped their asses, meaning John Cena versus Sabu, Kurt Angle versus Randy Orton, and a WWE title fight between Edge and RVD all had to come before this. It don't look great. The Spirit Squad were basically done after this too, with Triple H and HBK literally sending them back to OVW because they weren't good enough. And to summarize this, what I would say was, this weren't the best time for WWE. Number 6, Steve Austin, Owen Hart, Cactus Jack, and Chainsaw Charlie versus Triple H, the New Age Outlaws, and Savio Vega at In Your House, No Way Out of Texas. I mean, it's like we just drew these names from a hat. Let's throw everybody in there. Amazingly, Savio Vega was a last-minute addition to this, and you can guess who was meant to be there. This was a month before WrestleMania 14, so Shawn Michaels was meant to be leading the other team. Then he hurt his back at the Royal Rumble, so it was all change. Now, Savio rules, but he stood out here because the heels were all associated with DX, whereas Vega headed up Los Boricuas. So we just sold it that he really hated the Rattlesnake. You could have also used Chyna here, who was going to start mixing it up with the men anyway. It sort of sums up the WWF in 1998. It was a little all over the place. It would actually be Stone Cold's WWF title win that finally set them on a new proper course. Know of any other WWE main events that were playing crazy? Make sure you let us know in the comments below before you interact with this video by liking, subscribing, and whatever the other thing is. Number 5, The Rock and John Cena versus The Miz and R-Truth at Survivor Series 2011. Well, this one made no sense. The whole point of The Rock and John Cena fighting at WrestleMania 28 was because they hated each other. It's why their promos were so heated, and yet come November they teamed up. What? Of course it was done as we had a year's build, so needed to fill in the gaps, plus I'm sure Rocky wanted some in-ring time. That's only ever gonna help. Even then, I don't think anyone predicted the awesome Truth would be the opponents, but hey, Miz had been directly tied to this since WrestleMania 37, and he had been messing with Cena for months. At least we kept him in the loop, given sometimes he was made out to be the third wheel. As mean as it does sound, the A-lister and Truth were also disposable, so Cena and The Rock could knock them around, and it didn't matter. The whole point of this was that they could focus on the beef between each other. The worst part was the Great One was going to join forces with Zack Ryder originally before the heels took him out, so all of this was bizarre. But hey, we did have a 2012 main event to sort out, so whatever we gotta do. Number 4, John Cena versus R-Truth at Capital Punishment 2011. At least with the knowledge of the last entry, we can figure this one out. If R-Truth was in this position anyway, why not use him? I'm pretty sure it was also the only time Truth went for the WWE title on a televised broadcast, which is ridiculous, and beating John Cena was his goal. As ever, R was wonderful as he turned heel before this after seeing imaginary children, but do not get it wrong. He turned up the seriousness too, and almost called back to the character he played in TNA. The issue was WWE kind of rushed this, so having it as a pay-per-view main event was just a little bit weird. This was also when we had Raw and SmackDown monthly big main events, so I kind of think the takeaway here was, well, we may as well. Probably should have pushed R-Truth properly. That dude would have been totally fine. Number 3, John Cena versus John Laurinaitis at Over the Limit 2012. Whereas this one was just bad. Really, really bad. You have to imagine it was just to make Vince McMahon laugh, and look, if you want to do this somewhere on a pay-per-view, fine. It's stupid, but you do you. As a main event though, no wonder people stopped watching. This was also Cena's first feud after he lost to The Rock at WrestleMania 28, so talk about a waste. The heat was also on Laurinaitis too, as it was a no-Q match with his general managership on the line. I mean, that's not a word, but I still hate it. It also meant he won when the Big Show arrived to knock out Cena. And let's remind ourselves, this closed the show when CM Punk was the WWE champion. So no wonder he got fed up with the WWE all the way back then. It was really dumb. Still kind of makes me mad. Number 2, the 2020 Money in the Bank ladder matches. So lockdown was a weird time. It was sort of good that WWE continued as we did have a distraction, but they also did a lot of odd things, such as this. Because if we are taking the Money in the Bank match 2020 seriously, Baron Corbin killed 2 people as he threw Rey Mysterio and Aleister Black off a building, plus the women's scramble was happening at the same time. We also had cameos from Paul Heyman, Brother Love, Doink the Clown, and Vince McMahon, plus some of these cuts. At one point, we saw Stephanie McMahon. This was very clearly shot at a different time. Oscar and Otis were also the winners, which very much felt like a window into the current time period. You can actually hear Otis talk about this on Chris Van Vliet's podcast. Even he was a bit like, I don't know what's happening. And look, it was fine having this as the main event because it was essentially a cinematic match. But when you watch it today, well, it's kind of like we all did some drugs. Number 1, Braun Strowman versus Bray Wyatt at Extreme Rules 2020. In the horror show. I suppose we can call this the end of the cinematic pandemic run. And again, we just talked about those drugs. They make a return. Now, I do totally understand that WWE had to do something, but this one was just strange. I actually did appreciate the creativity put into it, but as a main event, well, I'm not sure it clicked. I've never felt the need to watch it since. Braun was the Universal Champion though, and Wyatt was his old mentor, so this could have been really good. The emotion was there, but everything else was just bizarre. They eventually went and fought in a swamp where Bray kind of killed Strowman and got attacked by a bunch of ghosts. There was also a woman holding a snake. I don't know, you tell me. The ending was more death as Wyatt dragged his old friend into the water, and yep, that was that. So this really was just a mini movie, but if you've never watched wrestling before, it's just so far removed. So given that it was meant to be nutty, I suppose that it's fine it was nutty, you should go nuts. But it doesn't make it any easier to explain, and if you do try and tell somebody this was a main event on a WWE pay-per-view, well, they'll probably walk off scratching their head. AEW is not a new company anymore. This is great because it means we've gone through phases and now we can look back at some eras, wonder what the flub was happening. It's like anything in that sense because at the time it was logical, we've just moved forward, and what once was now isn't. Summon. So let's take a walk down memory lane, and yes, I am Simon Miller. Here's 10 totally bonkers AEW main events. Number 10, Jon Moxley vs. Joey Janela at Fyter Fest 2019. It's almost strange to remember that Joey Janela was in AEW full stop. I don't mean that as a slight either. He's just gone on to do other things that your brain forgets. He was a major part of the original vision though, to the point at Fyter Fest 2019, he did indeed go one-on-one with Jon Moxley, who had hair. Now technically the main event of the card was the Elite vs. the Lucha Brothers, but as Joey vs. Jon was an unsanctioned fight, it went on last. Don't get mad at me, I don't make the rules. Mox had also recently debuted at Double or Nothing, and as he needed a big win, he was put against Joey Janela so these two could smash lumps out of each other. Seriously, this got violent, tables, barbed wire, and thumbtacks. You cannot fault the effort, and actually this turned out to be really important. Underlined how different AEW was aiming to be. If they advertised a street fight, damn it, that's what you were gonna get. Looking back years on, however, yeah, it almost feels like a different place. Number 9, Dustin Rhodes vs. Nick Comarato on the June 4th, 2021 Dynamite. I love stuff like this. There will be critics, but I want AEW to be an alternative, so take random guys and yeah, throw them into the main event and see what happens. We have 52 weeks of programming a year. You're allowed to take some flipping risks. Nick Comarato was such a guy who found himself in this position, and hey, he insulted me for not having hair around the same time, so flub that guy. Because this is the internet, I now have to point out he was joking, and it was very funny. We're all totally ruined. Nick was facing trainer Dustin Rhodes here, and to make it stand out, it was a bull rope match, a Rhodes family signature stipulation. The bigger feud that was hanging over the top was Dustin and QT Marshall, and as Comarato was one of QT's guys, well, whoop, there it is. Of course, the former Goldust won, and sure, it was a bit crazy we just threw this rule set into a random Dynamite, but we all know the deal nowadays. That's just what we do. You also get an amazing match between the Young Bucks and Death Triangle on this show. I know that could have been the main event, but here's the thing. It wasn't. I'm not going to get all uppity over a 3-year-old episode of Dynamite. Number 8, Bryan Danielson vs. Yuji Nagayama on the 24th of February 2024 Collision. Because Bryan Danielson wanted it. That was that. He went full Dave Bautista. I think it's quite nice Tony Khan goes out of his way to ensure those on their way out are allowed to have a perfect exit. Because wrestlers do give a lot. They deserve something on the other end. So when Danielson was desperate to face Mexican superstar Blue Panther and Japanese legend Yuji Nagayama, he had to go to CMLL to do the former, but when it came to the latter, we just did it on Collision. The two first met in the mid-2000s when they faced each other in a series of tag team matches for Noah, so I suppose Bryan must have had a good time. He did not want to wrap up his full-time career before he had a chance to take on Yoon one-on-one. Akiyama was 54 years old when he stepped into the ring for this too, but I tell you, he can hold his own, and 2024 for the American Dragon was basically flawless. He may be too good. It lacks suspense because Danielson was always going to win, but you watch this to feel the joy in your tum-tum. A man smiling ear to ear as he got to face one of his heroes. It really is quite lovely. Number 7, Chris Jericho vs. Nick Gage at Fight for the Fallen 2021. Well, this one caused some controversy. We all remember. Just as Nick Gage was using a pizza cutter to wreck Chris Jericho's head, we went to the adverts and yeah, there was a commercial for Domino's. This did not go down well. What we really should talk about is this was the TV main event, and it was a bloodbath. Jericho went through glass, for goodness sake, cry me a river, and Nick was basically the Nick you'd expect, even though beforehand nobody expected it. What? I just think we all thought Gage would have to switch to Chris's style in order to get his shot on Dynamite, but no. It went the other way, and this was so gruesome, we even got light tubes. There was a story as MJF was trying to put Jericho through the ringer so they wouldn't have to have a scrap, but yeah, I couldn't believe it, and then I rewatched it for this video, and I am still stunned. The fact this happened on a special edition on a Wednesday, the new wrestling world had arrived. I don't want to be that guy either because there is no right or wrong, but WWE would have never have done this. The fact that somebody now would, well, it was different to say the least. Maybe a little bit nuts. Number 6, Chris Jericho and Jake Hagar versus Luther and Serpentico on the 7th of October 2020 Dynamite. So it's fair to say this was Chris Jericho celebrating his 30th year in the business with his friends, but more power to him. There's always areas we can criticize, but I would like to do this with my buddies if I was in such a fortunate position. Let people have their fun. The rumor was always AEW had tried to get Lance Storm to step in here so Jericho could mirror his first ever match, but I don't think Lance was interested. Given Luther was a guy with a shared history, however, bam, here he was. There was also the relationship between Chris and Jake Hagar, which had been well documented because they were boys back in WWE. I guess Serpentico was just happy to be there. It was an odd main event just because there was a random element to it, but let's not pretend Jericho wasn't integral to establishing AEW no matter what you think of him now. I suppose this served as somewhat of a thank you. The other thing to note from this episode is that we also got Cody Rhodes versus Brody Lee in a dog collar match, which very sadly would also turn out to be the last of Lee's career. Really is still so sad. Number 5, the Devil's Masked Men versus MJF at New Year's Smash 2023. Some people dubbed the MJF versus the Devil feud as the worst of 2023, and I thought that was a little bit unfair. The intentions were good, but the whole thing was cursed, ironically. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. It brought us to New Year's Smash in December 2023 when, the Devil had some henchmen, like all evil beings do, and they wanted to end Maxwell Jacob Friedman and Adam Cole. Then they would take the Ring of Honor tag titles. This ties back into those problems as Cole was injured at the time, so Max had to go it alone, so he lost. I mean, that does make sense. He was just taking a defeat from nobody. These guys at the time were random figures. Eventually the Goons were revealed as Matt Taven and Mike Bennett, so at least that worked. It's fair to say by this point the story had fallen by the wayside, but nobody really wanted to see it in the main event. Number 4, the Golden Dragons versus Brian Cage and the Don Callis family on the November 15, 2023 Dynamite. Sponsored wrestling matches. They always annoy someone. As a massive video game nerd, this one made me happy because AEW was promoting Like a Dragon Gaiden, the man who erased his name. It's the most bonkers title ever. Everybody here wore the right clothes too, meaning Kenny Omega, Chris Jericho, Kota Ibushi, Paul White, Brian Cage, Takeshita, Carl Fletcher, and Powerhouse Hobbs were in suits. It was just fun. Weird, but fun. That was basically the match itself too, because they fought all over the place, including the moment that won wrestling. Ibushi cycling to the ring on a bike, hitting people with a pipe. It was so mad. I loved it. Come at me. The Heroes won after Omega pinned Cage, and if you had never seen wrestling before, I imagine you were really confused. That's fair. Sort of captured the spirit of AEW, however. That meant something. Number 3, Jon Moxley versus Mark Sterling on the September 2nd, 2020 Dynamite. Mark Sterling is a wrestler. I swear people forget wrestling is predetermined because a huge group of people think he's actually a lawyer. You are all silly. This episode of Dynamite was capped off with Moxley facing Sterling, though, mostly due to him using his solicitor powers. Him and client MJF had wanted John to be banned from using the Death Rider at the upcoming pay-per-view. Moxley wasn't happy, which is why Mark got it here, and he killed this poor man. He even hit him with a shoe. The revenge was instant as Maxwell jumped Jonathan and left him a bloody mess, so we had our angle, but hey. Facts are facts. Sterling main evented a Wednesday night. He should probably go and remind Chris Jericho of this too. Do you remember when from nowhere Jericho said that Mark Sterling was the lowest of the low? That felt really unnecessary. Number 2, Adam Copeland versus Manoro Suzuki on the January 24, 2024 Dynamite. I can sum this one up easily. Go back to WrestleMania 37 and imagine I told you that man in the main event a few years after this would be closing another show, but it would be against Japanese legend and angry man Minoru Suzuki. Nobody would have believed it. This is another reason why AEW existing is so cool, because for a long time this just wasn't possible. In fact, I will go on record and say before it was impossible. There was no way. The real joy is that Adam Copeland was 50 years old with Suzuki being 55, and they just kicked each other's ass. It was during that time when Adam wanted to prove he could hang with the AEW crew. And he did. It also closed the show, so this shall be a truth forever, and it was just so mad to see. Copeland got the win as he was heading towards another mad match with Malachi Black, and it's just entertaining, man. Never stop. Number 1, Bryan Danielson versus Satnam Singh on the May 22nd, 2024 Dynamite. So I have no issues with this because I am Dr. Robotnik. Bring me the chaos. Now the oddness comes in the fact Satnam barely wrestled on TV when from nowhere, he was main eventing Dynamite. I suppose it was another guy Bryan just wanted to fight, but still, what the flub is happening? The story was the Young Bucks had put a hit out on the American Dragon and this giant accepted. Fans were slightly irked, especially because it ended in a DQ caused by Jeff Jarrett. Oh yeah, again, how did any of this come to be? There's 6 degrees of separation with this, but you can tell your grandkids about this the day that the dragon took on the giant. I think it's fair to say that Raw is still WWE's A show, and as we learnt recently, come January 6, 2025, it is going to Netflix. That is a huge deal. Given its longevity though, sometimes the company did go totally crazy and gave you main events that would want you to go and wash your face. So do you want to get dirty? I'm Simon Miller and let's get into it and pretend the Lakers versus the Nuggets. That is right, NBA fans. Technically, 2 basketball teams have faced off in the main event of Monday Night Raw. This was really dumb, of course, and happened on the May 25th, 1999 episode, mostly because Vince McMahon is a petulant child. Because in short, Raw was booked at Denver's Pepsi Center when owner Stan Kroenke realized, oh man, my NBA team are playing that night, and I prefer them, so sorry wrestling, you gotta go away. Now to be fair, he never told WWE until the last moment, when they had to move to the Staples Center in Los Angeles, when, yes, they booked the Lakers versus the Nuggets, with the Nuggets being the heels and the Lakers being the faces. I mean, you couldn't make it up, but we actually did. It meant the bad guy team was made up of The Miz, The Big Show, and Legacy, who were taking on the good guy team, with John Cena, Batista, MVP, Mr. Kennedy, and Jerry Lawler. Trust me too, everybody was baffled by this, and I'm sure Stan Kroenke didn't give a damn. Like, with his PA run into his office, it was like, oh, you won't believe what WWE is doing. He'd be like, I'm counting my billions of dollars. Get out of my room. Number 9, DX and Hornswaggle versus The Big Show, The Miz, and John Cena. I mean, I don't think you could come up with a match that had any more weird names. And this happened during the guest host era of Raw. And look, 95% of guest hosts just didn't want to be there, which is why I quite like John Cena. At least he agreed to get in the ring. So on the January 18, 2010, when the one only Napoleon Dynamite did turn up on Monday nights, he was like, man, I'd love to be in the main event. So he went and came up with this schmuck. He asked The Big Show and The Miz for some reason, which is when DX took him up on his challenge, and they recruited Hornswaggle. I don't want to get into this. For some reason, Swogs was just a part of DX at this time. You tell me. Of course, Cena didn't do much until he was accidentally squished by The Big Show when Hornswaggle hit the tadpole splash to get the 1, 2, 3. Listen, this was fun for what it was, but just imagine we did this today. John was also there to promote his new film When in Rome, and this appearance didn't help that film at all, because it was a box office bust. Let us never do this again. Number 8, Jim Ross and John Cena versus Alberto Del Rio and Michael Cole. This is Vince McMahon at his worst, because on the 17th of October 2011, he booked this match to appease one person. That was himself. It's even odder because it came live from Mexico City, so you'd think we'd probably give the star treatment to Alberto Del Rio, but instead we went and teamed him up with a commentator. There's also no reason for this whatsoever, and I want to have a word with John Cena and Alberto, because when the bell goes ding, 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 it's Jim Ross and Michael Cole who start the thing off. What the flub are you doing? Now it's just done so Jim could slap Michael as hard as he could across the face when Cena and Del Rio basically wrestled for the entirety of the match. That begs the question, what were we doing this to begin with? Jim was then welcomed back into the ring so he could apply the ankle lock to Michael Cole, who had also been hit with the AA. Listen, proper superstars had been beaten by that move, so the whole thing was stupid. This is also how we built up John Cena versus Alberto Del Rio for the WWE title at Vengeance 2. So don't you tell me wrestling isn't better today, because it definitely is. Number 7, John Cena and Candace Michelle versus Trevor Murdoch, Lance Cade, and Umaga. Yep, you heard that right. None of those names that just came out of my mouth are wrong. It was July 23rd, 2007 though, and we had decided, come the Raw main event, anyone that is a champion has to be in the thing. So obviously we had tag team champions, we had secondary champions, and we had the WWE champion. But guess who the women's champion was? It was Candice Michelle. So sorry, Can, you're in. Of course, it just meant that John had to fight all of these guys, but they just wanted to beat up Candice Michelle. Honestly, never watch this. It will make you actually embarrassed that you were ever a fan of the sport. For some reason, Jeff Hardy couldn't stand this, so he's the guy that came out to make the save. When John Cena got magical powers from nowhere, he did whip everybody's ass when he got the 1, 2, 3. It was Trevor that took the pin, and of course today we barely go near these intergender matches, so we would never do anything like this. And look, I think you should be able to do whatever you want in pro wrestling, but I much prefer the edict we have in place in 2024, because this thing was totally trash. Number 6, Marty Jannetty versus Mr. Kennedy. Kennedy. Because why wouldn't you do this in December 2007? The best part is that Marty Jannetty could have headlined Raw back in 1993, and here we were 14 years later, and he was doing it again. Now this was after he had returned for a reunion with Shawn Michaels in 2005, when he kept coming and going and coming and going. That was basically the story of his entire WWE career. He could never hold down a job. As it was the 15th anniversary of Raw though, we did decide to do this fight, and I tell you this, Marty was as good in the squared circle as he had ever been. So let's just put an old fable to bed right here. It wasn't his in-ring skills that caused him all the problems. If you care about the actual main event segment, it involved Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Undertaker, and Vince McMahon. But in terms of the last fight we saw on this evening, it was indeed Marty Jannetty versus Mr. Kennedy. Number 5, Sarah versus DDP. That's right, Sarah was The Undertaker's wife back during this period, and she beat multiple-time WCW champion DDP. Now all tied into the fact that Diamond Dallas Page had arrived in the WWF as the stalker of this family, and it kills me. It kills me deep down in my tum-tum. Do you remember Page in WCW? He was the people's champ and the most over guy ever, and Vince McMahon went, well, I see you as some sort of criminal. It's stupid. It all built to the August 20th, 2001 Raw, and because McMahon was desperate for all WCW stars to look like chumps, Sarah beat him for the 1-2-3. And yes, of course, this was after The Undertaker whooped his ass, but a win is a win. I just don't think anybody needed this, and it totally ruined Diamond Dallas Page. I don't think he ever recovered before Shane McMahon and Drew McIntyre versus Roman Reigns and Gary the Goat Garber. Or Cedric Alexander pretending to be a janitor. I don't know. Don't ask me. Go talk to Vince McMahon. Although, nope, don't do that. It was the July 8th, 2019 Raw, though, and we must have been out of ideas, because Shane McMahon and Drew McIntyre were like, oh, Roman, we're going to take you on a tag team match, and because there's a janitor here, he is going to be your partner. And of course the janitor gets in the ring and he's all flippy dippy doo-dah, but he still loses. So that's not the story. That's never been the story. The whole point is the surprise janitor is meant to win. And then after the fact, he still takes off his bizarre mask and goes, ta-da! It's me, Cedric Alexander. But what am I meant to take away from that? Dude, you lost. It also means he went to work and he dressed up as a custodian. Honestly, this will melt your brain if you try to figure it out. Let's move on. Number 3, Randy Orton versus John Cena Sr. So that sounded like I was repeating myself, but I am talking about John Cena's dad. The best day of his life was probably the September 17th, 2007 Raw. Now make sure you understand that John Cena's dad absolutely loves professional wrestling and even has his own promotion. So yeah, he was probably in party mode. This was when Randy Orton was feuding with John Cena Jr. too, and of course, because he was crazy, he took the younger Cena and he handcuffed him to the ropes and then was like, I'm gonna whoop daddy's ass. There's some flubbed up stuff. The absolute best part is that it's Cody Rhodes who made the save, and talk about that tying into 2024 when John Cena saved his father. It was just a beautiful, wonderful moment all round. So look, at least this was a somewhat interesting episode of Raw because it had an angle, but when it comes out of my mouth, still sounds pretty bad. Number 2, Eric Bischoff versus Trish Stratus in 2003. I don't remember this at all, thank goodness. And the whole story was that Eric Bischoff was a total sleazeball here, so put Trish in the main event, who was having a terrible 24 hours. Just before this, she had lost the women's title. The worst part here is the stipulation, though, because if Stratus won, she would get her rematch, which was written into her contract anyway, but if she lost, she would have to sleep with the guy that used to own WCW. The reason I cover my eyes is because I like to pretend it's not true. Eric had also recruited Victoria to attack Trish, meaning he did get the win, when thank Flubblesticks, Linda McMahon walked out and said, no, none of this is happening, mostly because you're insane. Bizarrely too, this was the build-up to tell Bischoff he had a brand new co-general manager, which was none other than Stone Cold Steve Austin. What? I mean, seriously, what a truly unhinged way to reintroduce one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. Number 1, Howard Finkel versus Harvey Whipple. Now this was all the way back in 1995, so let's not pretend that the WWE hasn't been bonkers for decades. To be fair as well, the early Monday Night Raws always had crazy main events. I mean, one of them was Nikolai Volkov taking on a very young Matt Hardy. Clearly we needed more of this though, so manager Harvey Whippleman fell out with ring announcer Howard Finkel and said, listen here, you moustache man, you and I are going to fight in a tuxedo match. Now this was based off the fact that Harvey had stripped Howard off his clothes at WrestleMania, so now they were going to do it in a ring, and just let that ramble up in your brain for a while. Do you think anybody wanted to see this? No, they didn't, and Howard Finkel himself was totally against it. It only goes 2 minutes, they just roll around the floor for a while before the Fink does get the victory. Then in 2005, we did it again. This was with Tony Chimmel when Lillian Garcia got involved, and never ever forget, the only reason we ever do dumb stuff like this is because Vince McMahon found it funny. It's actually one of the massive reasons why it's good that he's finally gone.
TNA has had countless run-ins with the Wrestling Reaper through bad TV deals, dodgy owners, and various scandals. And yet it is still here over 20 years on from its founding. It ain't going nowhere. And in that time, the promotion has put on some amazing matches and some of the worst things to ever happen in a wrestling ring. But the matches we're going to be talking about right here are simply among the weirdest to ever close out some of their major shows. So I am Gareth, this is What Culture Wrestling, and here are the 10 weirdest TNA main events ever. Now, before we get started, a main event here means the final match on a card, regardless of what promotional material may tell you. And if it wasn't clear from the intro, this list is only going to include pay-per-views, as there really is enough material from the company's TV output for an entirely new list, which we might get to at some point. Right then, number 10, Kenny Omega vs. Rich Swann, Rebellion 2021. At AEW Winter is Coming 2020, Kenny Omega defeated Jon Moxley to win the company's top title, with a little help from TNA employee Don Callis. How could we ever forget? And this earth-shattering moment would spark the beginning of a working relationship between the two promotions, culminating in this history-making match at Rebellion 2021. In one corner was Omega, and standing opposite him, Rich Swann, the Impact World Champion. One fall, both belts on the line, winner take all. This was gonna get spicy, folks. Owing to the politics involved, matches between two world champions from different companies are extremely rare, especially with both titles up for grabs. It's even rarer that they have a conclusive finish. But this one provided just that when Omega pinned Swann to become a double champion. It was a good weird, but it was still pretty weird. Okay, Omega was actually a triple champion, as he was also the AAA Mega Champion at the time. But let's not complicate things, it doesn't take much to hurt my head. Omega would reign with the TNA Gold for a chunky 110 days before dropping the title to Christian Cage, who also worked for AEW. But he would later be beaten by Josh Alexander, restoring balance to the universe. For a while there, though, this odd Rebellion main event resulted in AEW's Omega being the king of TNA. The pandemic, man, it was a strange time. Number 9, Kurt Angle vs. Samoa Joe, Hard Justice 2007. Now, on the surface, there is nothing weird at all about Kurt Angle and Samoa Joe main eventing a TNA pay-per-view in 2007. Their rivalry is one of the company's greatest ever, and the pair clashed many times on pay-per-view between 2006 and 2013, sometimes with the world title on the line. So why has this one been singled out? One word followed by 3 more words: belts. So many belts. Angle was not just the TNA World Heavyweight Champion at that time, but he was also the IWGP World Heavyweight Champion. Well, sort of. He won the controversial 3rd belt, which is a whole other story for another time. As for Joe, well, he was TNA X Division Champion and the sole holder of both the tag titles, somehow. And guess what? All 4 championships, represented by 5 physical belts, were on the line in this complete cluster bomb of a match. I mean, why didn't they just throw the Knockouts Championship in there as well? Because why not at this point? Angle got the win and left the show more metal and leather than man. The most powerful person in TNA by a country mile. Just look at all those belts. Now, I've got a quick question for you. What do you think's the most underrated TNA main event in history? You let me know in the comment section down below. Number 8, the Main Event Mafia versus the TNA Frontline. Final Resolution 2008, December. For some reason, there were 2 pay-per-views called Final Resolution in 2008, and if you want to know why, well, the answer is cause TNA. That's why. Slaps head like Simon Miller. Now, the second one, which took place in December, the World Heavyweight Championship was defended in an 8-man main event. One featuring Booker T, Kevin Nash, Scott Steiner, Sting, AJ Styles, Brother Ray, Brother Devon, and Samoa Joe. Hell of a match. Shame it was way more complicated than that. Instead of an 8-way tussle, the match was instead a 4-on-4 tag. Booker, Nash, Nash, Steiner, and Sting were on one side as the main event mafia, whilst the babyfaces had come together to form the TNA frontline. Sting was the actual champion, but he didn't need to get beaten to lose the belt. Not that this mattered, as he just pinned Joe to retain the gold in the end. This was a needlessly complicated way to get all 8 men on a card that featured a 6-woman tag and a 13-man feast or fired match. It was complete overkill and nobody enjoyed it. Well, except for Sting maybe. And to be honest, I just want my Stinger to be happy, so that's fine by me. Number 7, Brian Lawler versus Scott Hall, weekly pay-per-view number 5. Before they moved to a more traditional monthly structure, TNA used to run smaller weekly pay-per-views as their main form of broadcast. In total, 111 of these shows were produced over a 2-year stretch, and they provide wrestling historians with a treasure trove of wacky matches. Take this weird one from the 5th edition, which was closed out by legendary performer Scott Hall against 1/3 of Too Cool? Okay then. Brian Lawler, the former Brian Christopher / Grandmaster Sexay, was a fixture of early TNA thanks to his stable Next Generation. He had main evented weekly pay-per-view number 3 with Hall as his partner, but after they lost to the team of Jeff Jarrett and K Crush, their partnership soured. The pair had a pretty standard match that mostly involved the bad guy battering his opponent up and down the arena before pinning him. Now, Scott Hall was the kind of name that could have main evented any show in the world, but the same simply was not true for Jerry's son. And looking back, this match should definitely have been swapped out for the X Division title clash between AJ Styles and Low Ki, which went on immediately beforehand. Number 6, the Great Muta and Tajiri versus James Storm and the Great Sonata, Bound for Glory 2014. Bound for Glory is TNA's version of WrestleMania, their biggest show of the year where the biggest stars put on the best matches, in theory. The 2014 edition of the show was the first to take place outside of North America, as the TNA crew traveled to the land of the Rising Sun to partner with Japanese promotion Wrestle One. A bunch of inter-promotional matches took place across the card, culminating in this very, very strange main event tag. Wrestle One was represented by 2 Japanese legends, the Great Muta and William Regal's best friend Tajiri. As for the TNA lads, well, they were Cowboy James Storm and future IWGP World Heavyweight Champion the Great Sonata. He had dropped the Great from his name when he won that belt, but this was still the same guy, people. Now, Sonata may be a main eventer these days, but this was long before he was at that level. And the other 3 guys were all definitely great wrestlers, but none of them felt like they really belonged here in the final match of a flagship pay-per-view. It was just a weird combination of talent to put in the last spot on a big show. The Wrestle One guys won, in case you were curious, but it was all just too odd to take seriously. Thank you very much for stopping by to watch this weird TNA video today, my friend. If you like this kind of stuff, then hit that subscribe button down below and you'll get more of it on your feed, timeline, screen thing, and that's just how the internet works. Yeah. Number 5, Tavita Fafita versus Sean Ricker versus Martin Stone versus Dalton Castle versus Crimson, Gut Check 2015. Gut Check was a program run by TNA, not too dissimilar from Tough Enough. It took prominent indie wrestlers and gave them a chance to shine on a bigger platform. And it helped the company land such promising talents as Ivelisse, Taylor Hendricks, and Brian Cage. In 2015, the company ran a one-night-only pay-per-view called Gut Check, where 10 rookies would compete for the chance to qualify for the main event. And the winner of that match would be named the competition champion and be granted a TNA contract. Exciting stuff. 5 people made it to the final match, which was fought under elimination rules. They were, in order of elimination, Dalton Castle, a future ROH World Champion, Martin Stone, who had become Danny Burch in NXT, Crimson, who had a decent run in TNA, Sean Ricker, the future LA Knight, yeah, and Tavita Fafita, the new Bloodlines Tongaloa. What a strange collection of talent that is. To be honest, most of these guys went on to have great careers across the wrestling spectrum, and this weird match played an integral part in making that happen. Number 4, Jeff Jarrett versus Julio De Niro and Alexis Lurie, weekly pay-per-view number 41. Another utterly mad combination of people, and back to the weekly pay-per-views we go. This time we're looking at number 41. Jeff Jarrett, who predictably was NWA World Heavyweight Champion at the time, was feuding with Raven and his stable of followers known as as the Nest. To test the Tennessee native, Raven pitted two of his disciples against Jarrett in his own specialty match, the Clockwork Orange House of Fun. Sounds fun. The rules of this hardcore match are stupidly complicated, so if you really want to know more about them, look them up and prepare for a headache. Just look at this image of this whole thing. Look at it. Look, what is going on? The two soldiers Raven commanded to go forth were Julio De Niro, a man perhaps best known for his appearance on the infamous Heroes of Wrestling show, and Alexis Lurie, who would go on to become one of the most influential female wrestlers of all time under her real name of Mickie James. Despite his valiant efforts, Double J was beaten by the Nest when Raven ran interference, setting up their title match 2 weeks later. Everything about this match, though, is just really weird, and I can't do much justice to it with my words, so if you want to go and watch it and experience it for yourself, then do that. But at least TNA can say that they had a woman in a pay-per-view main event years before any other major promotion. Little wins, eh? Number 3, Ron Killings versus Curt Hennig. Weekly pay-per-views number 17 and 18. There are two things newer wrestling fans need to know about R-Truth. One is that he's way older than he looks. I mean, he was born in 1972. And two is that he used to be a very different character. Under his real name of Ron Killings, Truth was a big player in TNA's foundational years. He won 2 NWA World Heavyweight Championships, becoming the first African-American to officially hold the belt. And he went up against some massive names. 2 back-to-back weekly pay-per-views in 2002 were headlined by Killings defending the NWA title against Mr. Perfect himself, Curt Hennig. The two had just missed each other in WWE. Killings got released in 2001 and Hennig returned in early 2002. But now they were free to wrestle their little hearts out. And considering where Killings is now in wrestling, the fact that this same guy defended a world championship against an all-time great in 2 different pay-per-view main events is enough to make your head spin, really. Number 2, Jeff Jarrett versus Glenn Gilberti, weekly pay-per-view number 48. Fledgling wrestling companies often throw out new and radical ideas in order to establish themselves, generate a bit of buzz, and get some attention. This risk-taking is to be commended, but there is no universe in which making Disco Inferno a main eventer was ever gonna work. Ever. Glenn Gilberti, the man behind the Dancing Fool gimmick in WCW, joined TNA right at the very start. His first main event was weekly pay-per-view number 47, but the most incredible match he ever had was when he faced Jeff Jarrett for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship 7 days later. Now, anyone who likes to complain about Jarrett being a top guy need only look at this thing to gain some perspective, really. Gilberti was nowhere near the caliber of star that could pass for a world title contender, and yet here he was for all the world to see. Mercifully, Disco did not win the world title and his TNA career quickly fizzled out. Since then, he has forged a healthy career getting angry on podcasts. His listeners likely unaware of just how close he once came to winning the oldest wrestling championship in the world. Number 1, Dusty Rhodes, Jeff Jarrett, and the Road Warriors versus Triple X and Vince Russo, weekly pay-per-view number 28. Considering he booked himself to win the WCW World Championship, it should come as no surprise, really, that writer Vince Russo had 3 matches in TNA, all of which were weekly pay-per-view main events. Shocked. The most bonkers has to be the first one, though, which took place at number 28. Russo was part of an 8-man tag where his partners were Triple X, Christopher Daniels, Elix Skipper, and Low Key. The trio were part of Russo's Sports Entertainment Extreme faction, or SEX, because of course that's what it was called. Their opponents were Jeff Jarrett and 3 legendary men who had their heyday in the 1980s, Dusty Rhodes and the Road Warriors. Unfortunately, as Russo didn't get in the ring for the entire match, fans were robbed of the opportunity to see him take a bionic elbow or a doomsday device. If all that wasn't enough, SEX won the match after a run-in by none other than Nikita Koloff, a baffling combination of young guns, old men, and non-wrestlers. This has got to be one of the weirdest wrestling main events in the history of our great sport, if not the weirdest ever. Now, WCW might have been pioneers when it came to the pay-per-view format, but that doesn't necessarily mean they always got it right. The company put on some utterly awful shows over the years with some truly bizarre matches in the final spot, the best of which are detailed right here. And if you can believe it, the year 2000 only appears twice. Who'd have thunk it, eh? So I'm Gareth, this is What Culture Wrestling, and here are the 10 weirdest WCW pay-per-view main events ever. Number 10, Hollywood Hulk Hogan vs. Roddy Piper, Starrcade 1996. During the 1980s, you could not have asked for a better main event match than Hulk Hogan vs. Rowdy Roddy Piper. This was the feud that had closed out the very first WrestleMania and had helped turn WWE into the biggest promotion in America. However, by the time 1996 rolled around, well, a lot had changed. Hogan and Piper closed out Starrcade 96 when they were both in their mid-40s, which meant something very different back then than it does today. But that's not really why this match is so odd. After years of failing to defeat the Hulkster as a heel, gallant babyface Piper made the NWO leader pass out in a sleeper hold, winning him the match and the WCW title. At least that's what everyone thought at the time. Despite Hogan being the champion and this being the main event of the biggest show of the year, Piper apparently forgot to make this match for the belt, rendering his victory ultimately useless. What a waste of time. Hollywood Hulk would hold on to the gold until August the following year, and Piper would never once get his mitts on the top prize. Boo! Number 9, Goldberg vs. Scott Hall, sold out 1999. At Starrcade 1998, Kevin Nash defeated Goldberg to win the WCW title and end Bill's undefeated streak in one of the most controversial booking decisions in wrestling history. And oh boy, there have been a lot of those. Nash got a huge assist in this match from his buddy Scott Hall, who used a cattle prod to weaken Goldberg so Big Sexy could hit him with a powerbomb. Only in WCW, eh? This all led to the main event of the next pay-per-view, sold out 1999, which saw Hall and Goldberg go one-on-one in a stun gun ladder match. Just one question, what the hell is a stun gun ladder match? The objective of this bizarre bout was to retrieve the titular weapon which was hanging above the ring, and then use it on your opponent. Yep, wrestling is a bit weird, isn't it? Having these two fight over a stun gun somewhat lessened the severity of their feud, which probably did deserve a main event match. Goldberg won, by the way, avenging his loss in one of the strangest ways possible. Hooray? And while we're talking about strange main event matches, what do you think is the strangest main event that you've ever seen? It may be included in this list already, but if it's not, and even if it's outside of WCW, just throw it in the comments and we will all look at it and go, yep, that is weird. Number 8, Goldberg vs. Chronic, Halloween Havoc 2000. The idea of one wrestler fighting 2 or more opponents is a weird one at the best of times, but the story behind this handicap match makes it even more odd. Goldberg was booked to face the tag team of Chronic, Brian Clark and Brian Adams, at Halloween Havoc 2000, in a match where, if he lost, he would be kicked out of WCW for good. The match was supposed to take place earlier in the night, but after the former Atlanta Falcon was laid out in a mysterious attack, it was pushed back to give him more time to heal up. Wow, they must have had something seriously special planned to go to all this trouble, right? Well, spoiler alert, they did not. Instead, Goldberg came out and handily defeated both men in a match that lasted under 4 minutes, and that was it. This might have been fine if it hadn't been the focal point of the show, but the fact that it displaced Booker T versus Scott Steiner for the world title from the main event made this ridiculous decision even harder to swallow. Number 7, Hulk Hogan versus The Butcher, Starrcade 1994. Everybody's relied on a favor from a friend at some point in their lives, but few people have ever mooched off someone so successfully for so long as Ed Leslie. The man best known as Brutus the Barber Beefcake made the most of his real-life friendship with Hulk Hogan during the height of his career. Fun fact, a quiz about him actually led to me being shaved bald too. Go and find it on YouTube, it's still there. But back to him and Hogan. This favoritism was on full display at Starrcade 1994, which ended with Hogan defending the WCW Championship against The Butcher, aka one of Beefer's 6,000 career gimmicks. The Butcher had turned on Hogan earlier in the year, aligning with the Three Faces of Fear in an effort to take his bestie's title. And unfortunately for everyone watching, this meant sitting through 12 minutes of bland, uninspired wrestling from a man who had absolutely no business headlining WCW's version of WrestleMania. Mercifully, this was the one and only time Leslie was ever put in this sort of position by a major company. Even WWE at the height of Hulkamania knew that this was a bad idea. But WCW clearly did not have the same level of clarity when it came to standing up against their biggest star brother. Number 6, Sting versus the Black Scorpion, Starrcade 1990. During Sting's first NWA World Heavyweight Championship reign back in 1990, he needed a credible heel challenger that was not Ric Flair. Sadly, there weren't many of those around, so head booker Ole Anderson came up with an idea. Anderson introduced the Black Scorpion, a masked man from Sting's past who tormented him for months. This led to a title match between the two at Starrcade, where if the Scorpion lost, he would unveil his true identity, the drama. The Stinger beat the different kind of Stinger with a diving crossbody, and then after a struggle pulled off his mask to reveal Ric Flair. What? As it turns out, Anderson had no idea who he wanted the Scorpion to be when he started running the gimmick. After a number of options fell through, Flair was begged to return to the main event scene, which he did so under the proviso that he would get to beat Sting later down the line. This was a complete and utter booking mess that led to one of the most disappointing unmaskings in wrestling history. So yeah, not exactly the way you want to end your flagship pay-per-view. Thank you for stopping by to watch this What Culture Wrestling video today, you lovely person. If you're enjoying yourself, then hit that subscribe button down below and you'll get more enjoyment out of more What Culture videos that will land on your screen. That's how it works. Number 5, Jeff Jarrett versus Diamond Dallas Page versus David Arquette, Slamboree 2000. At least when David Arquette won the WCW World Heavyweight Championship, the company had the decency to do it on TV and not on pay-per-view. The Scream actor did get to headline a major show, however, as he technically defended the gold against Jeff Jarrett and Diamond Dallas Page at the 2000 edition of Slamboree. This was a triple cage match inspired by the multi-Academy Award-winning movie Ready to Rumble. I may have made the first part up. And each part of the cage contained a new variety of weapon. The third and final stage was the Guitar Room, Jarrett's signature weapon, of course. But it was Arquette who used one to turn on his friend DDP and hand Double J the belt, his belt, that he just won. Okay then. Things got even crazier when after the bell, Kanyon ran down to help Page, only to get intercepted by Mike Awesome. The former ECW man lobbed Kanyon off the top of the cage to send him plummeting down to earth, which would have been a cool spot had this show not taken place almost 1 year to the day and in the same building as Owen Hart's tragic death from a similar stunt gone wrong. Oh boy. Number 4, Hulk Hogan and Dennis Rodman versus Lex Luger and the Giant, Bash at the Beach 1997. Some wrestlers worked their butts off for decades without ever coming close to a pay-per-view main event for a major company. Dennis Rodman got to do it twice just by being pals with Hulk Hogan though. The legendary NBA player first appeared on WCW pay-per-view at Bash at the Beach 1997 as an honorary member of the NWO. Alongside the Hulkster, he took part in a tag team match against Lex Luger and the Giant. Now you might understandably expect a match like this to only go a little while, just to let Rodman look good and give the fans something to talk about. But no, this dragged on for 22 entire minutes. To make things even stranger, if that was even possible, Rodzilla wasn't even the one who took the fall here. Instead, Luger beats Hogan by submission to end the match in a huge feel-good moment that eventually led to the Total Package winning the WCW title on Nitro. It turns out that Rodman not only main evented a WCW show, but he also played a small part in one of Nitro's biggest ever moments. And no, he was not done there, folks. 1 year on from his first Bash at the Beach main event, Rodman stepped back into the ring to close the show once again. Only this time, he was not the only basketball star involved. To counter Madonna's ex-boyfriend, Diamond Dallas Page recruited another top player, Karl Malone, to be his partner for this tag match against Rodzilla and Hogan. As luck would have it, Malone's Utah Jazz and Rodman's Chicago Bulls had just faced each other in the NBA Finals, making this a huge coup for WCW at the time. Once again, the company could have put on a 10 or so minute match to give the fans what they wanted and not let the non-wrestlers embarrass themselves. Instead, though, they booked this match to go even longer than the one from the year before, because WCW. Viewers didn't even get the satisfaction of watching Hogan submit this year, as the Disciple, yet another of Ed Leslie's gimmicks, interfered to allow his best buddy to pin DDP for the win. This was an utterly horrible match that no amount of publicity could have justified. It was just a massive open goal that WCW put way over the crossbar in the end. Number 2, the Mega Powers versus the Alliance to end Hulkamania, uncensored 1996. In a desperate attempt to get him over as a babyface in 1996, WCW put Hogan back together with his old Mega Powers partner Randy Savage, and pitted the two against a bunch of people who had all beefed with the Hulkster over the years. Ric Flair and Arn Anderson were there from the Four Horsemen, whilst Hogan's recent scuffles with the Dungeon of Doom were represented by Meng, the Barbarian, Kevin Sullivan, and Lex Luger. Zeus, the villain from Hogan's 1989 movie No Holds Barred, was given the new name Z-Gangster, and Robert Jeep Swanson was put under a mask as the ultimate solution. That's a lot of people right there. Hogan and Savage fought all 8 of their foes in a doomsday cage match, where they had to work their way down from the top of the structure to the floor. This was some of the most cartoonish stuff that WCW WCW ever did. The babyfaces were hitting people with frying pans at one point. Look at them go. This was an absolutely mad match, especially when you realize that Hogan forming the NWO was just 3 months away at this point. What a weird world. Number 1, Diamond Dallas Page and Jay Leno versus Hollywood Hogan and Eric Bischoff. Road Wild 1998. Now, Rodman and Malone may not have been wrestlers, but at least they're athletes. Someone who is very much not an athlete, though, is chat show legend Jay Leno. But that did not stop him from main eventing WCW's Road Wild pay-per-view in 1998. The comedian became involved with wrestling after Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff invaded The Tonight Show, challenging him to a match at the upcoming show. Leno found an ally in Diamond Dallas Page, who always seemed to get stuck babysitting celebrities, and it was on. Instead of putting Goldberg in the main event, who had beaten Hogan for the WCW title just 2 months earlier, WCW booked the NWO guys against Page and Leno for the final match. This sideshow battle came to an end when Kevin Eubanks, Leno's bandleader on his show, hit Bischoff with a diamond cutter, allowing his boss to pin Eazy-E, with his shoulders about 6 inches off the mat. Oh, Jay, what do you like? A completely insane idea that resulted in rock-bottom buy rates for the company. Jay Leno's involvement in Road Wild 1998 has gone down as one of the most infamous decisions WCW ever made, and that is saying something. Sadly, folks, not everything in wrestling can be the Bloodline or Kurt Angle versus Brock Lesnar, and for every truly stellar main event in WWE SmackDown's history, there has been one that, well, stands out like a sore thumb, to be honest. Hell, there's been that many, we were able to make a whole damn list about them. Because I am Gareth, this is What Culture Wrestling, and here are the 10 weirdest WWE SmackDown main events ever. Oh, for the purposes of this list, a main event is going to be the final match on the card, regardless of whether or not they were the final segments of that show. So now we've got that out of the way, let's get to it. Number 10, La Familia versus Batista, Nunzio, Funaki, and Colin Delaney, June 6, 2008. After winning the World Heavyweight Championship at One Night Stand 2008, Edge and his on-screen squeeze Vicky Guerrero, along with their La Familia stable, were celebrating on SmackDown when that big nasty Batista came out to spoil the fun. The Animal was placed into an 8-man tag team match against the faction for the night's main event, but with one condition: Vicky got to pick his partners. This led to the multi-time world champion and future box office topper teaming up with 3 of the biggest jobbers to have ever jobbed, those being Nunzio, Funaki, and Colin Delaney. Yep. Even with a group of partners with about 3 televised wins between them, though, Batista still held his own against Edge, Chavo Guerrero, Zack Ryder, and Kurt Hawkins. After a few brushes with defeat, Big Dave crushed Paul Ryder with a spear and a Batista bomb, giving him the win in what was essentially a 4-on-1 handicap match. So not only did the 3 lower card lads get to close out the show, but they actually got to win a match as well. Dreams really do come true. Number 9, Kane versus the NXT Rookies, April 2nd, 2010. Everybody remembers that the Nexus made their debut on the June 7th, 2010 episode of Raw, destroying the ringside area, beating up John Cena, and angering WWE sponsors when Daniel Bryan choked Justin Roberts with his own tie. Those were the days. However, this wasn't actually the first time this combination of stars had been seen on the main roster. On April 2nd, 2 whole months before their infamous Raw appearance, Wade Barrett, Justin Gabriel, Heath Slater, David Otunga, Skip Sheffield, Darren Young, Michael Tarver, and D-Bry all made their SmackDown debut against Kane. That's right, it was all 8 of them versus Kane on his own. I mean, sure, why not? This bizarre encounter was over in less than 9 minutes after the NXT Rookies, as they were known at the time, all attacked Kane at once for the DQ. The Big Red Machine had actually managed to eliminate 2 of them before this, though, including Wade Barrett, you know, the guy who would go on to win NXT later that year. It's nice to see that WWE were making the Nexus look like absolute chumps even before they'd officially debuted. These guys really didn't stand a chance, did they? And while we're talking about the Nexus, I want to know right now, how would you have booked this whole Nexus thing in WWE? Because we know how WWE did it and it didn't go very well, so I want to know how you think it should have played out. You let me know in the comment section down below. Number 8, Booker T and Josh Matthews versus JBL and Orlando Jordan, November 4th, 2004. Whilst most fans will remember Josh Matthews as a play-by-play commentator and one-time vessel for The Undertaker, he actually began his career as an in-ring competitor. Real name Joshua Lomberger, Matthews came second in the first season of WWE's Tough Enough, but was still hired by the company in 2002. 2 years later, he would find himself on the wrong side of the WWE champion JBL though, who slapped the poor lad for allegedly not showing enough respect whilst interviewing his running buddy Orlando Jordan. This led to Matthews' first match on SmackDown, in which he was paired with Booker T to take on JBL and Jordan on the November 4th episode. The future Mr. Madison Rain got his butt handed to him for most of the match, but still managed to make a hot tag to Booker, who picked up the win after an axe kick to OJ. The next week, Matthews had his first and only singles match on WWE TV too, where he not only took on Jordan, but beat him after some help from Booker. So Josh Matthews is technically undefeated in televised WWE matches. What a world, eh? Number 7, The Rock, Chris Jericho and Mike Chioda versus the Dudley Boys and Nick Patrick, October 4, 2001. Anyone who's seen the Invasion pay-per-view might remember that WWE referee Earl Hebner took on WCW referee Nick Patrick in a 5-star classic of a match. I mean, that 450 splash from Hebner was truly something, folks. Yeah. Anyway, it turns out that wasn't the only time officials from opposing companies got into it in 2001, as demonstrated by this show-closing bout from the October 4th SmackDown. Patrick returned to the ring for his second and final WWE match, with his opposite number this time being WWE's Mike Chioda in his one and only competitive fixture. As for the actual wrestlers, well, the Dudley Boys were backing up Patrick, whilst Chioda had The Rock and Chris Jericho on his side. Not bad backup. After a typically nonsense brawl that saw Chioda rip Patrick's shirt off in the worst softcore movie ever made, Rocky hit a rock bottom on the WCW ref, which was then followed by a lion salt from Y2J, which was then followed by the worst people's elbow of all time from Chioda to end this insane match in a victory for the good guys. Poor Nick, what did he ever do, eh? Oh yeah, Starrcade 97. Number 6, Finlay and Little Bastard versus the Boogeyman and Little Boogeyman, February 23rd, 2007. Fans watching No Way Out 2007 were subjected to some absolute tosh when Finlay and his son Hornswaggle, who was legitimately called Little Bastard during this time period, took on the Boogeyman and Little Boogeyman. Rob Van Dam versus Shelton Benjamin got bumped to the pre-show for this, just so you know. Because its audience clearly hadn't suffered enough, WWE ran this match back just 5 days later on SmackDown, and for reasons known only to Vince McMahon, it was the final match on the damn card. At least this version was significantly shorter at just 2 minutes 46 seconds, but watching well-respected grappler Fit Finlay trying to work with this menagerie of joke characters, whilst the announce team were making demeaning comments about little people, was just as painful to sit through the second time. The Irish crew got the win with Hornswaggle pinning the Boogeyman, as if anyone really cares. But this feud still was not over. The two teams fought again on an episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, before Swaggle beat Little Boogie in a singles match on SmackDown in May to mercifully banish this feud from television forever. A strange, strange time. Cheers for stopping by to watch this What Culture Wrestling video today. You're wonderful and probably the best kind of weird person. Now hit that subscribe button down below and you will get more of these weird and wonderful videos in your life. Yes, I can hear it in your soul. That is exactly what you want. Number 5, Sean O'Hare versus Mr. America, May 22nd, 2003. Andre the Giant, The Ultimate Warrior, Ric Flair, Shawn Michaels. These are just some of the many names that Hulk Hogan has main evented a wrestling show with across his lengthy and accomplished career. However, when the great history of Hogan is written at some point in the future, it probably won't mention the time that he closed out an episode of SmackDown against Sean O'Hare. Now, technically, this wasn't Hulk Hogan. This was Mr. America, the mask-wearing patriot that turned up on the blue brand shortly after Hogan got fired, and looked, sounded, and acted just like the Hulkster. I know. Whilst Mr. America's main feud was with Vince McMahon, Roddy Piper was also involved following his return at WrestleMania 19, as was Piper's apprentice, Sean O'Hare. As a result, O'Hare got the opportunity of a lifetime on the May 22nd, 2003 edition of SmackDown, when he fought Hogan in a singles match. And he only bloody won. Now sure, it was by countout, but a win over Hogan is a win over Hogan, brother. As a result of his defeat, Mr. America was then forced to take a lie detector test, which I'll just leave you to go and check out for yourself if you haven't already. It sure is something. Number 4, Brock Lesnar versus Stephanie McMahon, September 11, 2003. Stephanie McMahon was having a rough old time of it in 2003. A series of decisions that she made stayed as SmackDown general manager led to tensions between her and her father, which the chairman handled with all the grace and decorum that you'd expect from a man of his position. Just kidding, he made her life a living hell in one of the most bonkers matches ever promoted by the company, and that is saying something. Steph was pitted against human bulldozer Brock Lesnar to close out the September 11th SmackDown. The billion-dollar princess managed to get some offense in, hitting both the Beast and her father with low blows, but was ultimately caught and manhandled by Lesnar, who chucked her into the barricade like she just told him that Minnesota was the worst state in America. Before Brock could fully dismantle Steph, Kurt Angle thankfully made the save, preventing everyone in the arena that night from being accessories to murder. Technically, this wasn't an official match, so maybe it shouldn't count. But the fact that it did happen and did close out an episode of actual television meant that it was just too insane to leave off the list, folks, so it's here. Number 3, Zach Gowen and Stephanie McMahon versus Big Show, July 3rd, 2003. Just when you thought 2003 SmackDown couldn't get any weirder, 2 months before she got pulverized by Lesnar, Stephanie was taking part in another match she definitely should not have been in. Zach Gowen, the inspirational one-legged wrestler that WWE treated like dirt when they had him on their books, was embroiled in a feud with Mr. McMahon following his association with Mr. America. Gowen wanted a WWE contract, but Vince was not going to let him have one without a fight. So this match was made for the July 3rd SmackDown. Gowen and Stephanie versus The Big Show. If the babyfaces were able to win, then Zach would officially join the SmackDown roster. But if they lost, then, well, they'd get beaten up by an angry giant. Through grit, determination, and the power of friendship, plus a shed load of interference from Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar, Gowen and McMahon were victorious in their quest, with Zach himself pinning Show off a top rope moonsault. It was magical. A feel-good moment for the ages. Zach Gowen was now officially a WWE superstar. Just, ignore how the rest of his career went. Number 2, Sheamus and Mean Gene Okerlund versus Daniel Bryan and Alberto Del Rio, April 10, 2012. Beloved interviewer Mean Gene Okerlund had 2 WWE matches during his career. The first was in 1984 when he and Hulk Hogan teamed up to defeat George Steele and Mr. Fuji. And the second was in 2012? Surely that can't be right. Oh no, it is. The date was April 10th. Mean Gene was in the ring interviewing Sheamus, who had just beaten Daniel Bryan to win the World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania 28. John Laurinaitis then came out to announce that Sheamus would be facing Bryan tonight in a tag team match. D-Bry's partner would be Alberto Del Rio, whilst the Great White would be teaming with the 69-year-old announcer. Yeah, that's right. The heels took out Sheamus and then cornered Gene in the ring, presumably about to beat him within an inch of his life, when out came a bunch of legends led by Roddy Piper to save Okerlund's hide. Thank God for that. This distraction allowed Sheamus to recover, hit Bryan with a bro kick, and pin the American Dragon once again. Between his 2 wins in WWE and his 2 in WCW, Mean Gene is actually undefeated in televised matches. What a legend. Number 1, The Big Show versus The Fabulous Moolah, November 28, 2002. The November 28, 2002 edition of Smackers emanated from Columbia, South Carolina, the home city of women's wrestling legend and, dodgy person, The Fabulous Moolah. Stephanie McMahon, the heel authority figure at the time, was not a fan of Columbia or Moolah, so put the hometown gal in a match designed to humiliate her. Her opponent? The Big Show. Yes, this actually happened, folks. Moolah was nearly 80 years old at the time and looked absolutely terrified as her 500-pound foe made his way down to the ring. Paul Heyman initially made it seem like Show was not gonna hurt the Hall of Famer, but then changed his mind and ordered his charge to give her a choke slam. Mercifully, Brock Lesnar then ran in to save the day, preventing what surely would have been an honest-to-goodness homicide from taking place. The bell never actually rang, so this match technically never happened, but in kayfabe, if Lesnar hadn't been there, then Big Show would have surely beaten Moolah to a heavily made-up pulp. SmackDown, eh? What a weird little show.
ECW died 24 years ago as of me speaking, and yet people still love it. That means they did something right. Feeling very much like the underground promotion that didn't give a flub, Extreme Championship Wrestling paved the way for a lot of what we expect today, and they changed the game. They also did a lot of weird stuff. That was true when it came to the main event, so hello my friends, my name is Simon Miller, and let's take a mad walk down ECW memory lane. Number 10, Rob Van Dam vs. Balls Mahoney at Anarchy Rules 1999. Let's not forget Balls Mahoney was called Balls for the reason you think. That is ECW. The late Jonathan Reckner's most famous character was a mainstay of the promotion, winning the tag team titles a handful of times and always being involved in something crazy. Even though he was super popular, he was never portrayed as the top guy, which is why it was interesting when he did get put into the main event at 1999's Anarchy Rules. There were some asterisks in the sense this was for the TV title and not the World Championship, as that had already been defended. Taz had put it on the line against Mike Awesome and Masato Tanaka. Now, this could be important because Taz had already made it clear to Paul Heyman he was heading to the WWF, so I wonder if this was why the card was structured this way. We do know it hurt their relationship a little bit. Even if true it was nice Balls got his moment, as you have to imagine, he also got a nice payoff too. Maybe all of the ECW roster deserve that. If you know, you know. It's been talked about on many a video. Number 9, Mike Awesome versus Spike Dudley at Guilty as Charged 2000. We could just leave it there. That's a weird match, let alone in the main event. This is why ECW was so great though. Just do what works. If you never saw Spike in the promotion too, his role was exactly the same as in WWE. Get whooped. He never won a title under Paul Heyman, but that wasn't for lack of trying. The company teased it a lot. This is why at Guilty as Charged 2000, Dudley went against Mike Awesome for the World Championship, and the whole story was telling you, damn it, Spike is gonna do it. Talk about getting this right too. Some of the near falls during this sent the crowd nuts, and because it was ECW, you could believe they did mad stuff all the time. Eventually, Awesome finished him off, but yeah, these were the type of risks other promotions should have been watching. Just made you cheer for the underdog. That's a really important part of wrestling. Number 8, Jimmy Snuka versus Terry Funk at Bloodfest 93. So let's throw a curveball in there. This is when ECW was just Eastern Championship Wrestling and still part of the NWA. Even here, though, we were hinting at the future. A supercard held over 2 nights that also saw the debuts of Tommy Dreamer, Taz, and Sabu, who didn't realize how important they were going to be. The main event was instead between 2 recognizable names, Terry Funk and Jimmy Snuka. They fought in a cage for the TV title, and look, we all know Funk's relationship with the company, but Snuka was also the first guy to hold the then ECW World Championship. This was properly bloody and brutal too, with Terry getting the win, and within a year the Superfly was gone entirely. That same month, one Paul Heyman joined the promotion, and the rest, as they say, is history. Number 7, Jake Roberts versus Mr. Hughes at the ASWA ECW MEWF Super Show in 1993. Well, what a fantastic name for an event. It really rolls off the tongue. This was in November though, when 3 promotions came together to put on one card, but do not try and find it. It's next to impossible. I don't get what happened, but it's been wiped off the face of the planet. It is real though, and featured an ECW title match between Taz and Sabu. But this wasn't the main event. That did indeed go to Jake Roberts and Mr. Hughes. Now, Hughes was an odd one, because while he was a journeyman, he was best known as Chris Jericho's bodyguard in his early WWF days. And of course, we all knew the other guy. Jake was a legend. The written reports state the man with the snake won in about 14 minutes, and really we should have switched these scraps around, but I suppose that's hindsight. I mean, Roberts would even have another run with the World Wrestling Federation in 1996, so his name still carried some serious weight. I was just going to hazard a guess though. I don't really think it needed to close the show. Number 6, Cactus Jack versus DC Drake at the Return of the Funker 95. So I'm sure you can figure it out with the name. We were celebrating the return of Terry Funk. Otherwise, this would have been bizarre. There is some oddness here, however, because did Funk have a match on this card? No, he didn't. His protege Cactus Jack did get in the main event, however, but he didn't know who his opponent was going to be. That was chosen by woman, or the then Nancy Sullivan, and she picked DC Drake. I don't know who that is. Don Clyde Drake was his full name, and he was actually retired at this point, hence why he was brought in and lost in 4 minutes. This was the idea though, because as soon as we were done, Terry walked to the ring and whooped Jack's ass, along with Drake Woman and the Sandman. Tommy Dreamer and Shane Douglas also got involved, with Shane going babyface, so really the main event was just one big angle. But hey, at least Terry Funk featured heavily. That's all the fans wanted anyway. Number 5, Terry Funk and King Kong Bundy versus Sabu and Road Warrior Hawk in November to Remember 1993. 4 years before it came a full-on pay-per-view, November to Remember started life as a big annual super show from the ECW arena. Soon it was dubbed as their version of WrestleMania, and how did the first one end? a mess of a tag team match, which kind of was similar to the original Mania. Road Warrior Hawk was drafted in to team with world champion Sabu, with the other side being TV champion Funk and a mystery partner. This was indeed WrestleMania 2 main eventer King Kong Bundy. I think ECW were just desperate to make this really complicated because both titles were on the line, so of course Bundy turned on Terry, allowing Sabu to become a double champ. I mean, at least it wasn't boring. But it was totally woefully bonkers. Number 4, Crash the Terminator and Miguelito Perez versus the Headhunters at Ultra Crash 93. So what we're learning today is that ECW in 1993 was off the wall. Paul Heyman still wasn't around, but you wouldn't know he wasn't part of this. It was a bloodbath. The Headhunters had their first of 3 main events here as they faced Miguelito Perez, who would actually go on to be part of Los Barricas in the WWF, and of course Crash the Terminator. You'd probably recognize him as Hugh Morris or Bill DeMott, and this bizarre combo of wrestlers had a big old fight, with blood spilling almost instantly. The Headhunters eventually got the win, but everybody was left in such a state. It was a proper war, and I warn you, it is not for everyone. Number 3, Sid vs. Skull Von Crush at House Party 1999. ECW ran 4 supercards at House Party from 1996 to 1999. And the last version was indeed closed out thanks to the master and ruler of the world. Sid was just called Sid here and was so over with these ECW fans, although in terms of this time period it was a one and done. He soon went back to WCW, but not before main eventing here against the amazingly named Skull Von Crush with a K. Now this was Vito LaGrasso or Big Vito elsewhere, and in the semi-main we did see Taz retain his world title against Shane Douglas. Why this wasn't last I don't know, because Sid came to the ring and ended Skull in just 3 minutes. It was a destruction. It was also Sid's second out of 5 EC matches in total, and again, I can see why they brought him back. Sid got mega pops all the time because he felt like a star. I think he must have enjoyed it too. He didn't really have to do much of anything but soak in all those cheers. Number 2, Rick Rude the Sandman and Tommy Dreamer versus Sabu, Rob Van Dam and Jerry Lawler at Heatwave 97. So Jerry Lawler hated ECW. This was the story on Raw as the WWF and Extreme Championship Wrestling teamed up. Yeah, the King would take any opportunity to knock on him. It meant the ECW roster invaded Monday night on the 24th of February and told Lawler he was gonna get it. Jerry didn't appreciate that, which brought us to Heatwave 1997, where the King did indeed head into the main event. It was in a steel cage, because why the flub not, and the 3 men tasked with teaching him, RVD and Sabu, a lesson were Rick Rude the Sandman and Tommy Dreamer, and it went bad. This is because Rude turned on his friends to prove he was WWF for life, and Taz also turned up here. He slapped Lawler and locked him in the Taz mission. It is hard to fathom now, but seeing the World Wrestling Federation's color commentator get choked out like this was so surreal, especially because Vince McMahon never worked with anyone, and yet look, it's happening. Here we are. Number 1, Terry Funk versus Bret Hart at WrestleFest 97. Well, this one was amazing. Just 2 months after Jerry Lawler showed up in ECW, the WWF relationship took an extra step forward. WrestleFest was put on to celebrate the career of Terry Funk, who was going to retire. Which, yes, sounds silly today, but at the time, that was the intent. Funk also wanted to wrestle someone special for his fake final bout, and yep, after asking for Bret Hart, he actually got the green light. This was great. The event also had Mick Foley versus Sabu, and when we got to our main event, it was fought under no disqualification rules. That was because Terry wanted to go crazy, and of course he lost. He was as old school as they came. He wanted to go out on his back. Do not forget the Hitman was the WWF champion at the time, so this was truly strange, but it showed how respected Funk was. Everybody knew his contributions to the business. Around 4,000 people attended this too, and amazingly, Terry was back in the ring 11 days after this because he headed out to Japan. So bless that man. He just couldn't let it go.
WCW Nitro played host to some incredible main events during its time, as well as some that would ultimately sink the company into the ground. But that's not what this list is about, baby. This list is here to celebrate the strangest matches to ever round out an episode of Nitro. So I'm Gareth, this is What Culture Wrestling, and here are the 10 weirdest WCW Nitro main events ever. Number 10, Sid Vicious vs. Tank Abbott, February 28, 2000. 2000. Vince Russo is one of the most divisive figures in the wrestling world for a number of reasons. The original bro, no, not Matt Riddle, was responsible for some of the best moments of WWE programming during the Attitude Era, but is also credited with helping to destroy WCW in its final years. One of his more bonkers ideas whilst working for Ted Turner was to crown the inexperienced and frankly terrible former UFC fighter Tank Abbott as WCW champion. Well, this pitch was so poorly received by company management that Russo was removed as head writer and then quit the promotion when asked to work as part of a committee. But this nightmare scenario almost came true on the February 28, 2000 edition of Nitro, where Abbott squared off against world champion the late great Sid Vicious, with Sid's gold on the line. Much to the delight of everyone not named Tank or Vince, the cage fighter was beaten in under 4 minutes in a match that could best be described as ropey. Yep, we'll go with ropey. Abbott would go on to join the boy band faction 3 Count, and any dreams of a world title reign were permanently crushed. And while we're talking about Sid Vicious, it seems like a good time right now to ask you, what is your favourite Sid Vicious moment of all time? Let me know in the comment section below, and rest in peace, you legendary man. Number 9, Kevin Nash vs David Flair, June 28, 1999. Of all the Nepo babies in wrestling history, and oh, there have been a lot of them, few are as infamous as David Flair. Despite receiving a considerable push in WCW, Ric Flair's son never lived up to his father's reputation, or came anywhere near it really. That didn't stop the promotion from repeatedly trying to get him over though, which included this main event from the June 28, 1999 Nitro. On a show featuring Curt Hennig, Diamond Dallas Page, Eddie Guerrero, and more, it was David that was chosen to go up against world champion Kevin Nash in the main event. And yes, the belt was very much on the line. What? This was a lumberjack with all of Flair's pals surrounding the ring, but Nature Boy Jr. still couldn't get the job done. He was even armed with a stun gun. How bad do you have to be to lose a match with all that going for you? Well, very bad. The bout ended in a dismal DQ in the end. If only this was the end of David's push. But sadly, that would continue well into the following year. Unwoo. Number 8, Kevin Green vs the Giants, June 22nd, 1998. The late Kevin Green was a mighty fine American football player. He played for several major franchises, was part of the NFL's 1990s All-Decade team, and was elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2016. Impressive stuff. Sadly, none of this talent transferred over to the wrestling ring. Green had 5 matches for WCW between 1996 and 1998, 4 of which were on pay-per-view. His only TV match was on Nitro on June 22nd, 1998, and his opponent was the Giant, who himself was only about 3 years into his career. And in Ring Classic, this was not, dear viewer. The two big boys bumped into each other a few times, Giant hit an elbow drop, Green hit a low blow, and then Curt Hennig ran in and caused the DQ. And that was it. This whole charade was over in under 90 seconds, and almost 30 years later, people are still wondering why it was chosen to go on last. The pair would have a rematch a few weeks later at Bash at the Beach, where Giant would get his win back in what turned out to be Green's final wrestling bout. Hell of a run. Number 7, Ric Flair vs Eric Bischoff, December 28, 1998. Anyone who's seen Starrcade 1998 will know that Eric Bischoff and Ric Flair had a match that Eazy-E won after punching Nate with a foreign object. Eric Bischoff holds a pinfall victory over Ric Flair, and people have the nerve to suggest that wrestling is unrealistic, eh? Luckily, Flair got the chance to right this wrong the very next night on Nitro, when he took on Bischoff in a rematch. This time, though, the presidency of WCW was on the line, so you can bet your rear end there was a whole lot of nonsense surrounding this match. The NWO and the Four Horsemen all got involved, as did DDP, Booker T, and a returning Randy Savage, who turned on the black and white by beating up the Giant. And all this chaos resulted in Flair submitting Bischoff via the figure 4, winning the day for the good guys. Yay. The crowd absolutely loved this segment, cheering for it like it was the second coming. But of all Flair's great main event opponents over the years, Hogan, Sting, Steamboat, Funk, etc., it's probably safe to say that Bischoff ranks towards the bottom in terms of wrestling prestige. Yep, he probably does. Number 6, The Wall vs Hulk Hogan, March 27, 2000. Whilst most people will remember Hulk Hogan and The Wall brother from that incredible segment where Hogan was able to identify his enemy whilst he was standing on top of a massive building, they did actually have a match too. It took place on Nitro on March 27, 2000, and was a throwback to Hogan's glory days, where he would defend the WWF Championship against the Monster of the Month. That strategy might have worked in 1984, but in 2000? Yeah, maybe not. Wall was being given a pretty substantial push that involved him chokeslamming a lot of people off of very high things. But this wasn't nearly enough to put him on Hogan's level. There was also no way the Hulkster was going to take a bump like that, Jack. Nor was there any reality where this meathead was going to get a clean win here. Sure enough, the match ended in a DQ when Vampiro attacked the Wall. Even though Hogan had hit him with a chair just moments earlier, the two would never face off one-on-one ever again as well. At least we'll always have the building promo though, eh? Thanks for checking out this wacky WCW list today, my friend. And if you're enjoying your lovely self, then hit that subscribe button down below and you will get more of these What Culture videos in your life. Just do it makes sense. Number 5, Goldberg vs. Glacier, May 18th and June 29th, 1998. Here's a weird match that didn't just main event one episode of Nitro, but two. Raymond Lloyd is best known to the wrestling world as Glacier, the Mortal Kombat-inspired character who debuted in WCW in 1996 with one of the craziest backstories ever. There simply isn't enough time to go into it all now, but it's definitely worth a read when you're finished with this wonderful list. Despite his entrance and ring gear costing an absolute fortune, Glacier spent most of his time in the mid-card, but would challenge for the occasional championship. He actually got the honor of closing Nitro twice in 1998, the May 18th and June 29th episodes. And on both shows, his opponent was defending United States champion Goldberg. On one side of the ring, you had an ultra-serious badass whose character was firmly rooted in reality. On the other, though, you had a guy ripped right from the pages of a pulpy comic book. Who on earth thought this was a good idea? Predictably, Bill dispatched the wannabe Sub-Zero on both occasions, because of course he bloody did. In total, Glacier would contribute 4 points to Goldberg's legendary win streak, but would never get his frozen hands on a title of his own. Not cool. Number 4, NWO Sting vs. Mr. JL, October 21st, 1996. At Fall Brawl 1996, Sting shocked the world when he betrayed WCW and joined up with the evil NWO. Or did he? This turncoat was in fact Jeff Farmer, the former Cobra who had painted his face to look exactly like the Icons. Rather than disappear after the pay-per-view though, NWO Sting stuck around and even got himself a main event match on the October 21st Nitro. His opponent was Mr. JL, better known as Jerry Lynn, meaning that match featured a fake WCW champion and a future ECW champion. What a world we live in. Now the contents of this match aren't really important, but how it ended sure is, folks. Whilst NWO Sting had JL in the Scorpion Deathlock, the real Sting made his return to cause a DQ, dressed in a proto version of his famous crow look. This was also the night the Stinger debuted his Scorpion Death Drop finisher, and it was the final time he spoke on air for over a year. A historic moment, one worthy of the main spot. But in kayfabe, if Sting hadn't intervened, this would have been a very odd way to close the episode, that's for sure. Number 3, The New Blood vs. Kevin Nash, June 5th, 2000. Of all the wackadoo ideas WCW had in 2000, The New Blood, a stable made up of all the young, oppressed talents, was actually one of the better ones. But sadly, they made them all heels because, WCW. This gigantic group of wrestlers, led by Eric Bischoff and Vince Russo, got the chance to do some serious damage when they were booked in a gauntlet match against Kevin Nash on the June 5th edition of Nitro. One man versus a whole faction. What could possibly go wrong? They didn't get off to the best start, as Nash eliminated Disco Inferno, Chris Candido, Johnny the Bull, Big Vito, and Rey Mysterio Jr. within about a minute. But don't worry, here comes Shawn Stasiak to save the day. Oh wait, no, yeah, he's leading a big beatdown that gets the match thrown out. Never mind then. So to summarize, Nash beat 5 guys in about 60 seconds without breaking a sweat, and the match ended in a brawl that made the New Blood look like total chumps. People wonder why this company went under in less than a year's time. Number 2, Kevin Sullivan vs. Hard Body Harrison, March 10th, 1997. Gather round, friends, and hear the sordid tale of Hard Body Harrison. Harrison Norris Jr. served as a sergeant in the US Army before joining the WCW Power Plant training facility in 1995. He started appearing on TV in 1996 as a jobber to guys like Hugh Morris, Glacier, and Disco Inferno, but then scored his big break on the March 10th, 1997 Nitro. He was booked to face Kevin Sullivan on a show that emanated from from a Florida nightclub, and it did not go well for him at all. First, Sullivan beat him up, then Jacqueline beat him up, then Tony Schiavone got his name wrong on commentary, then Sullivan threw him into a swimming pool after they both got counted out. Since the quote-unquote main event of this show was an NWO talking segment, this was actually the final match on the card, all 2 minutes of it. As for Harrison, he would stick around in WCW until its dying days. He sued WCW in 2000 for alleged racial discrimination, and in 2008 he was sentenced to life in prison for his part in a sex trafficking operation. What a guy. Number 1, Vince Russo vs. Booker T, September 25th, 2000. WCW did many stupid things in its time, but one of its most dunderheaded moves was putting its world title on head writer and non-wrestler Vince Russo. This travesty went down on the September 25th, 2000 episode of Nitro. Russo got the main event slot against defending champion Booker T. But this was no ordinary match, people. This was a caged heat match. That means it was basically a Hell in a Cell ripoff. Russo tried to get the better of his opponent by wearing football gear and wielding a baseball bat. But Booker had things in hand. That was until Russo's rival Goldberg showed up and speared Vince through the cage wall. Since the objective of the match was to escape the cage, and Russo had been judged to have done so first, he was declared the new champion. And not only that, but he immediately vacated the title, meaning that Booker T couldn't even get his win back. Madness. If anyone you know ever tries to defend Vinny Rue and his booking decisions, just show him this. That should get him to shut right up.